And we're back. I said there'd be a part 2, and I wasn't lying. We're here, the second
Part
day.
2, here we are.
But it's like a lifetime has passed already.
It does feel that way, though. It's been quite timeless, hasn't it?
It has been quite timeless.
Yeah, I woke up this morning, I thought, there's no way that is quote-unquote 24 hours. There's just absolutely no way.
Indeed, my friend, indeed. So we're here with Hamilton Souther, and again, going to go deep down the rabbit hole and explore a lot of things. And as I've gotten to get to know you a little bit better, really you've been something of a disruptive technology in the ayahuasca shaman field. And that's really what I've kind of learned about you is you've initially started down the path and then realized, okay, what are these things that could be improved? What are these things that could be optimized? Which way do I want to go and take this? So I'd love to kind of jump into your story a little bit and kind of set that groundwork before we get into the gem that we're going to drop on everybody here at the end. Holy shit, get ready, people.
Okay, when I started drinking ayahuasca, first it was not a fad or a thing. It was strictly a traditional healing practice in the Amazon. And I was really blessed, like truly blessed to be able to work with 2 elder master shamans.
Well, tell us how you came to them through some visions that you
I did come
right?
to them through some visions and through some hardship. And I think that, for anybody out there who's on the path, that aspect of it needs to be spoken about, that it's not just smooth, right? Like there's a little friction along the way. But yeah, I ended up with these two great elders. Basically, they had visions that I was going to come before I ever came, but they never let me know that. So they were always leaving me on the precipice of doubt. Mm-hmm. And I had gotten into some hairy situations in the Amazon my first year down there, some falciparum malaria, and that's probably the closest I've ever come to physically dying. And some, not such great shamans of good intention, because I was very naive about the whole thing. So I had to do a little dabble in that kind of, right. Frosting. Get into
you can't just drop yourself in the middle of the jungle as a gringo and hope that it's going to work right the first time out.
You may be a little bit of the mouse in the cage with the snake at first, right? Maybe just a little bit like that. And so I worked through all of that, and I finally got to Alberto. And I first went to Alberto for healing because I had, gotten involved in some stuff that needed to be healed, right? Mm-hmm. I was not well at that point. And then from working with Alberto, I got to know Julio, but Julio had actually denied me apprenticeship my first year. Mm-hmm. He was like, I'm too old. It's like it took me too long to get there. And so he was already in his mid to late 80s, and the rigors of taking on an apprentice takes a lot out of you when you're the master shaman guiding. It's like having a new child, and it's an adult child who doesn't know anything. And in my case, knew nothing. I did not know how to canoe. I did not know how to just even walk in the forest.
And like a child, you'd be shitting and vomiting yourself constantly.
The whole time. I mean, constantly, right? And these guys' teaching methods were like, drink this and we're not going to tell you anything about it. Uh-huh. So I met...
Old school.
Old school. I mean, this was old school. We can get to that in just a second. But I was walking by Julio's house, which was 400 yards from my house. This is just a footpath. Imagine, dude, there is nothing out there. There is, other than forest. It's virgin Amazon forest with, 40, 50 people living on hundreds of miles, and that's it of jungle. And so I was walking by his house, and I heard him screaming. And I run up into his house, like little palm bark floor, like tiny little, hut in the middle of the jungle. And I see him there with his leg super swollen. So I started doing chupada healings where you suck out the bad stuff and blood's filling my mouth and I'm spitting it out and the skin's unbroken. This is right out of Twilight Zone mysticism.
Whoa.
4 in the afternoon.
Wait, how much time had you been down in the jungle?
Formally, literally at that point a year, but I had only been training kind of with ayahuasca for maybe a couple months.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I was seat of the pants, having no idea what I was doing, but Julio's going down. Alberto's 5 days in the forest. There's no way to get to him.
Someone's got to suck.
Someone's got to do something. And so I'm just like, give me your potions, give me your mapacho, and let's do this. And so I did that healing on him for 4 days and healed him. Uh-huh. And so at that, we had this very Yoda moment, because he was just like Yoda. I mean, he had the big pointy ears and everything, right?
Yeah.
All shrunk down, his little mapacho, he'd speak in sentence fragments and stuff, but deep wisdom in everything that he said.
Right.
And he just said to me that the medicine was strong in me, and what did he owe me, right? For like
now
for
everything he says, I hear in Yoda voice.
It's how it is. But
Strong in me, the medicine
strong
was.
in me, the medicine was. Yeah, and so oh man, if he spoke, you listened, because if not, that night in ceremony, when he would literally shapeshift into having a jaguar head and a human body, and you would look at him and be like, yeah, that's impossible, but that's real. You listen.
Yeah.
When like Stern grandfather has a jaguar head on, you listen, right? For real. So I told him I didn't want.
Good advice.
Good advice.
Good advice, Hamilton. Anybody has a jaguar head on, listen.
Listen.
Even if it's not Stern grandfather, if they got a jaguar head on.
Yeah, I mean,
don't fuck with them.
You listen. Yeah, there's no doubt. And I don't mean like put on a like a dead jaguar that they killed in the forest head. I mean he shape-shifted his head so that if you were sober or not and you looked at him, you would see a jaguar head on a human man. I mean, this is like as deep as this mystic guy was in the forest. And so I told him I wasn't interested in payment. What I wanted was to be trained.
Right.
So I wanted to be one of them, right? Mm-hmm. I was like, I want to be one of you and Alberto. And right when I said that, Alberto walks out of the forest. Like, this is like on cue. It's like would have been in a movie. But he literally walked out of the forest. He's like, Julio, what's wrong? He runs up, he checks Julio. He's like, I dreamt you 5 nights ago that you had gotten sick and that I rushed back because he was out on this hunting trip. And Julio looks at him and goes like the white guy healed me, right? Like, and so they never told me, but they had a meeting that day. I only found out when they filmed a documentary about us, and Alberto told the story. They never told me anything. They had a meeting and they agreed to train me, and so that's like when formal apprenticeship training started.
Yeah. That's so you said some things in there that people are going to be like, what is he talking about? You were sucking blood out of his leg, that there was an unbroken skin.
Yeah.
And his head was transforming into a jaguar.
Yeah.
So clearly the paradigm that you were operating under is a little bit different than the paradigm that most people account as real. But for you, you were there.
I was there. And I want to, really emphasize that I was in a lot of fear and doubt.
Yeah.
I was not a believer. Okay, I had not, drunk the Kool-Aid and was believing this. I was trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't real. I was stuck in a paradigm of real and unreal because I was hanging out with people that would say things in a stone cold straight face, just like I did, that blew my mind, and I could not fathom that as being part of normal, ordinary reality. Like, every time they said goodbye to each other in the forest, they said, call me if you need me. And I know for a fact neither had used a telephone. So how could two guys be saying, we're going to part, call me if you need me, until they taught me those arts. And I mean, it is right out of the Twilight Zone. This is how you want to know how they do it?
Yeah.
You want to know how that checks out? Okay. There's a kind of spirit in the forest that whistles.
Uh-huh.
Okay, it has a very distinct whistle. So they send that spirit to go find the spirit of the shaman wherever the shaman is in the astral planes. Okay? That consciousness link is to the physical body. So that spirit goes and finds them and then whistles a ringtone, just like on your iPhone or on your Galaxy or whatever, to make the shaman aware of, check in to see who's calling. And then in their vision, then they link once they've gotten the shaman's attention with the spirit that literally whistles.
It's just an astral telephone.
It's exactly what it is. It's the exact same
problem.
technology, right?
Yeah.
And which is why they use the exact same words. And I know it seems like unbelievable, right? There's impossible that this could actually be happening. But if you read anthropological texts, the anthropologists who studied tribal peoples from around the world have story after story after story after story of these incredibly psychomagical, mystical experiences happening as normal. And so what I think's happened is that the development of the Western mind and Western educational systems have trained the brain and trained the mind and trained the identification away from these skills. But it's not that human beings don't inherently possess these capacities. I think we do. They're just lying dormant.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And one thing we talked about yesterday is one of the things that I think needs to happen is these people with these skills need to be brought out and shown. These things need to be shown to the world to open up the mind's capacity for believing that these things are even possible. Like right now you can listen to any skeptic who will, stone cold refute every instance of paranormal, mystical, any of these kind of instances. And I think if we could at least shake that foundation a little bit and say, hey, there's other stuff out there. It's not that there's no science to explain it. It's just we haven't been looking in the right spot yet. You know, and I know that's definitely a big part of your overall mission. But the more that we could do that and just say, hey, open your mind to more possibilities, even if we don't know the empirical Newtonian cause and effect way that this works yet, because our minds are too small. You know, like somebody who can't see Wi-Fi because they don't have a fucking Wi-Fi detector. It's there. You know?
Yeah,
so,
let's give it time. I mean, let's just make a call out to everybody who hears the podcast. If you know of these things and you're interested in participating, write us, and let's start to put together a think tank and a coalition of people who want to prove this stuff, and, you know, with no bias. Like that's where I am with it. I've proven this stuff to myself over 14 years. I've seen miraculous healing take place at our center every week for 14 years. I don't need to prove this anymore. There are skeptics out there, and you know, an opinion is simple in this world. It's just really simple to have an opinion, and it's really simple to sell an opinion, and it's really hard to do something. It's really hard to organize and build something and make something that really helps people. And negative opinions that just shut down the possibility of something greater in life doesn't do anything to help humanity.
Nope.
And so I just say, like, you know, your time's numbered. That's it. Like people are organizing to show with real scientific bias that there's something to all of these different forms of healing and transformation.
No doubt about it. All right, so let's fast forward a little bit.
All right.
You get to a point, you were explaining to me yesterday, 500 ayahuasca sessions, played it by the book, stuck with tradition. And then after that, you started to take a look and say,
Yeah, okay, so you get deep into the tradition and you start drinking ayahuasca and you're in these dietas. And so this is like training for the people who aren't familiar with this. This is like hardcore shamanism training, just like if you were at med school and then residency and you're becoming a doctor or a surgeon or something like that. This is for the Amazonian people, really, really intense. And I started to really look at their culture like an anthropologist, right? Like I was studying it as I was learning it, as I was living it, I was studying it. And I started to see some things that I would consider to be issues. You know, just fair enough. Like I love the medicine, I love the culture, I pay homage to it all the time. But I also saw there's some issues. There's a tremendous amount of conflict. Mm-hmm. There's a tremendous amount of this idea of battle. There's this tremendous amount of sort of like real core tribal, you know, nature and vibe and mythology to it. And I saw that the greatest growth to people interested in this were Westerners. And I thought, okay, if you want to really understand the tradition, you have to study the tradition, you have to understand the mythology, you have to understand the collective terms, you have to understand, you know, where the people are coming from, and you have to learn their psyche. Like when I first got down there with these guys, even though we could speak the same language, I couldn't understand them.
Yeah.
I literally couldn't understand them because the way that they formulated thought and then used language to try to express that thought was so foreign to me, and it was already outside my paradigm of reality. I had no idea at first what they were talking about. So you put all of that through, you know, about 500 ayahuasca ceremonies, and I had already by that point gained the sort of the rank of considered maestro, and I was practicing on my own and all of that. And I started to want to address some of those issues, see if that really is the way that it is, or maybe that's a cultural component, you know. And so I started to explore beyond solely the traditional ways of practice, in conjunction with Westerners coming looking for healing for, you know, their problems. And I realized that there were a lot of different ways that we could start to take this medicine form, not lose the essence of the tradition, but start to enhance it and build upon it and allow it to grow and evolve. And at first there was trepidation, like, you know, are you going to get the cosmic smackdown for doing this? Who are you, big boy, to be like taking this medicine in that direction? And, you know, it was the same answer that I always had through apprenticeship, which is like, well, this is just what I'm doing. So, you know, if it's not okay, I'll know, and if it's okay, it'll all work out. And for me, it represented as something that not only was okay but expansive. You know, we had even better results. We had you know, healings that before in the other modalities wouldn't have even been possible.
Yeah. One story you shared, which I'd love for you to share again, is you were talking about dieting the plants one at a time, and at a certain point, you know, that requires an immense amount of time to diet these plants one at a time. And at a certain point, you're like, maybe we can do this a little differently. Tell that story.
Yeah. I mean, from the very beginning, I was already thinking that, because dieta's, really, first of all, it's incredibly strict, right?
Right.
And so yeah, you hear this idea in the traditions that you're supposed to diet one plant at a time. Maybe 2, maybe maximum 3, but by there, the jealousy of the spirits is a big issue, and they're all called receloso and celoso, and they have this whole concept that they're not like getting along. And my sort of rational scientific mind could not handle that, because I'm sitting there going like, okay, wait a second, like, it's enough for me to think that like I'm putting tree spirits in my body. Right?
Yeah. You already got me that far.
Okay, but now they're like angry with each other and stuff. I'm like, wait, no, this is what I deal with like in normal everyday life. This is like high school. Like I'm not going back to spirit high school, with all of these spirits in me. And so I tried to understand what was really being said. And then I came to finally understand that they're talking about different kinds of energies or different kinds of spirits within the plants, not all of them, right? Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, I'm not interested in those guys anyway. I'm here for medicine. I'm here for, Ikaro medicine and divine knowledge and learning. And so I figured they would all be able to get along. And so I asked Alberto, I said, like, can I diet all the plants? And his response to can was always, of course you can. But you got to be up for whatever happens.
Right.
You got to be up. So he said,
can and should
are two totally different things. In their world, it's very literal. You know? And so he said, yeah, you can, but you'll go crazy. And he said, so, promise me you won't do anything stupid when you're crazy. And so I started to diet, 8 plants, 10 plants, 14, 16, 18, 20, 28 at a time. And what I found was that when you go into that process, each plant spirit makes like a holographic version of you. And so it's training you, 28 different versions of you at the same time. And you definitely feel like you're a little wonky in the head because you have 28 minds, right? Like normally we're used to having one mind, but imagine now having 28 minds, like 28 computers all linked, all learning, something different at the same time. But in my case, I just I made some very simple rules of engagement, which was like no repetitive rocking motion, because that can really start to freak out your head, like when you look at like people who are suffering, tremendously mentally, there's certain kind of behaviors that are demonstrated. So those out. And if I can't, behave in a way that I knew growing up is appropriate for society, well, you don't go, you just lock yourself in your house for a day or two until it all calms down, as part of that like really hardcore training. But again, this is not like a recommendation at home. This was part of intense shamanic training.
There's, not a lot of people who could withstand that kind of heat, and be able to put themselves through that kind of situation. What is it? What is it? Is it something that you were just kind of born with, or is this something that you've cultivated? Is this something that we all have in us if we have the willpower, or what is this? Because that sounds like the worst idea I've ever heard for myself personally.
We got to put it into context. I was in my early 20s.
Uh-huh.
I had a certain amount of aptitude.
Yeah.
I had already received a very traditional calling, and I loved it more than anything. And I had gotten to a point that I was completely committed that if I died through the process, I was accepting of that. You put all of that together, and I just was able to squeak by, right? You put like put a perfect scenario together, but especially during that period of time in my life, like that's what I lived for. It wasn't like I went to go to the Amazon and participate in some ayahuasca and then I went home and gained benefits. Like I went and I stayed and I went to learn and train, and I took it very seriously, and I was blessed to have 2 maestros that taught me in the traditional way. They treated me like blood relatives and made it very, very difficult for me to learn as a training method. Like when I sat down with Julio, I asked him if a white guy could learn. I was like, can a white guy learn this? Because I didn't see any other like real white guys learning this. And he goes, we all bleed red if you can survive. Right? And like that's how we started. This was not like touchy-feely Montessori school. This was like, you're going to bleed, and if you can make it through that, like, then you can make it. Mm-hmm. And in my case, it was something that was a passion. And I think if you have like a true passion for something and some aptitude, you can turn it into something amazing.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it.
Yeah.
So your processes, accelerated your learning, and then you continued that, opened up Blue Morpho, started offering healings there. But there was a point, and I want to get to that, there was a point where you got onto the scent of something really fucking big. And
Yeah.
I got a little taste of that yesterday. And to close this out, I want you to kind of take our audience through what you took me through. But
Yeah.
tell us about this new thing that you started to encounter and how it kind of solved the problem of these shamans going to fight night and throwing darts at each other.
Yeah. So I would say 8 years into the process. Now, 8 years, that is 8 years living in the Amazon, participating in ayahuasca at least 100 to 120 times a year, like just in it, right? I came to a focus on what I called universal mysticism and universal love. And that spread to universal consciousness and then to universal definition of consciousness. So what that means in a practical way is what aspects of life are universal to all of us? Like, so could we look at anything that would apply to every single human being, regardless of language, culture, age, anything? You know, how could we deduce that, and how could we rationalize it into a cohesive understanding? Because it's all over the place. Our mind is taught to, focus on pieces, not the whole. And I started to get really interested in the whole, and then that started to evolve how we could work with ayahuasca, right? And so really it started with universal love. I noticed that love was a piece that was universal to all people. And then I looked at mysticisms and I saw that love was sort of the ultimate expression. And by the time it gets to that ultimate expression, it's sort of right at that boundary of quantum uncertainty and this cosmic expression. And I saw a lot of correlation between that and the notion of God. And so I started to look to really try to compile all of these pieces. That all took me back into the States. I had left the Amazon after 12 years. I was back in the States and suffering extreme chronic pain, like unbelievable chronic pain. And now I was back in the U.S. medical system. Uh-oh. And with now pre-existing conditions and incapable of being able to get medical insurance. And so think about it, I'm in my mid-30s. I've been abroad for 12 years. There I can get medical treatment without any problems. The costs are no problems. It's all completely available. Everything's available. Anything that you need's available. And I come back home and I can't get treatment and I couldn't afford it. And so I was like in that crux. And so a good friend of mine said, try medical marijuana. And I'm like, no, we can't do that. All this Amazonian training didn't really in the traditions, didn't really comply. And finally I just said, the pain's too bad. I'm going to do it. So I got on the vaporizer and got my medical card, which I found out that I could get.
Yeah.
Right. I could go get a medical card, but I couldn't get, physical therapy for my hip. Right. So
the former's probably better than the latter anyway.
Hey, so we went with that. And but the first time, I consumed it solely for the purpose of chronic pain, but I had, shamanic mystical awakening with the plant. I was applying the same things that I had learned down in the Amazon in conjunction with the use of the plant. Never in my mind before that had I thought the plant had those capacities or capabilities, because, it wasn't in the collective concept or the culture around the plant. And then I had this incredible explosion and I realized, wow, we can use this. This is big. We can use this for shamanism. So I started using it in a ceremonial, ritualistic fashion for chronic pain to try and enhance the healing capacities of it. And in that fourth ceremony, I was in connection with the head medicine spirit, sort of La Madre, like with La Madre of the plant, and was in this city that looked like Tron, full 3D, like city of light, and I am cruising down the street at light speed, and I'm having these visions that every other street is going to places where there's culture use of cannabis. So we passed hip hop, we passed sadhus, we passed Jah Rastafaris, we were passing all these zones, and then we got to this place where everything started to look really similar to Star Wars Jump to light speed. It was all becoming pixelated and these long, filaments of light. And then I popped into a space unlike anything I had ever seen.
And that says a lot for someone who drank ayahuasca several thousand times.
Completely. And that's what I was going to say. This is the part that was so amazing. In ayahuasca, when you get in ayahuasca, it's hyper structured. Hyper, man. It is shapes, colors, and patterns. It is dancing. It is moving. It is spirits beyond spirits beyond spirits, or images, whatever you want to call them. It doesn't matter. It's being upon being upon being upon being in the millions and then the trillions, and it goes forever in every way.
Fractally, yeah.
This was just still and empty and filled with this like primordial substance of creation, but nothing else. That was it. And I have no idea how long I was there because it had no linear time associated with it. I came out of the vision at some point. I don't even know how. And I didn't even think anything of it because it was so novel. I just felt great, and that was it. And it just happened that the next week I was heading back down to Peru to do another series of sessions with ayahuasca. And so I was there, drinking, I don't know, 13 ceremonies in 15 nights, something like that. Because when I go, I like to, just
pack it in.
Just pack it in, yeah. It's a trip around the shopping mall, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just packing in, and about by the 8th night ceremony, something like that, the spirits came to me and they said, "You're going to go back and structure that world for healing, and you're going to give it to the people." I was just like, I don't know, what are you talking about? Like, okay, 14 years of mysticism did not prepare me for this message. Like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I don't know how to do this. What do you mean? Like, we know how to navigate the space. We know how to change aspects of the space. But, like, take a space that's this primordial soup of whatever. I don't even know how to get back. I was in Tron. I don't know. Right? It was
well,
like
first
that.
get me to Tron, and then I know I don't.
And then maybe I can figure out, like, how to get there. And so, but the biggest problem that I confronted with that was that it took me about 45 minutes to get there. And I had been trained to, like, hold concentration and focus like a hardcore meditator for that amount of time. I'm like, people don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So how can we do this? And so I went in and I was in a state of consciousness that in physics would look like the molecular bonds, like how matter is held together. Like that was sort of the state of consciousness and the vision I was in. And put it in perspective, I'm in a single bedroom apartment, first floor in like an apartment tower in LA near UCLA, just to like think like where this is going down, right? And so I get into the ceremony to sort of structure this world, not knowing what's coming, and I started to look at it philosophically, and when I did, I realized that there was no room for ego. There's no room for self to do this. There's no room for personal desire to actually do this. Like if you took this task very seriously. And ultimately, I realized that I was being given an opportunity to, play divine architect for like a model. Like how would you do this?
Yeah.
Like how would you do this? Oh, you really want to have the world be a better place? How would the world be a better place? Like, oh, you really think you can touch human consciousness? How would you do that? And so I got in there and I started to build it in vision, knowing that what I was building was something that we would be able to share. And I ultimately coalesced it to 9 universal definitions that to me represent the 9 dimensions in which human beings coexist, like actual dimensions of consciousness. And once it was created, I started working with it and then sharing it with other people and working with it more and really coalescing it. And then I realized that we had mapped universal human consciousness. And it took me a while to come to the realization of what had happened that night in ceremony, because really I was just looking for a place to be able to have like a true watering hole, like the true melting pot, like the true place that anybody from any tradition, from any philosophy, from any background, from any education level, from any socioeconomic level could find a place of peace and joy and harmony within themselves, to experience an aspect of their life like that. And then when I realized to do that, we had basically mapped the universal states of human consciousness. I thought, okay, we discovered something big, but it wasn't like set out. It really just happened.
Yeah.
It really just happened.
Well, at this point, everybody listening is trying to wrap their heads around what you're talking about, but it's not even possible because I couldn't do it until I felt it.
Exactly.
So if you're up for it, if you want to look, you can just look straight into the camera and lead these good people into a little taste of what exactly you're talking about.
Okay, so the very first thing we need to do is just like get really calm and get really, really centered. And so if this is something that you want to take very seriously and not just listen to, I recommend, taking a little time just to set a space, dim the lights or whatever, like make it really calm in the space that you are, because this is going to be sort of a guided visualization that's going to help us tap into something very, very deep. What we want to do is first start by taking some short, deep breaths. Just like in nice and quick and then long and out, and just get some kind of energy flowing and get centered here in our minds and in our bodies. We want to be able to feel it. There are 4 key realms to consciousness that makes all of these experiences real for us. And the first one that we normally connect to is the mental plane. So we want to allow ourselves to have an experience in the mental plane. In our physical plane, we want to be in a calm, relaxed state. In the emotional plane, we just want to be stable or centered or open or present, whatever that looks like right now. And then in our imagination, we want to be able to free the imagination so that we can start to model and understand the universe in a different way. So let's just go through that first, just to center. And we can look at this just as sort of like a guided meditation or a guided visualization. Breathe in. And start to just let it kind of just relax. Like if you're just going to just really, really relax into your body and take another deep breath. Now we need to use our imagination, and we need to use our mind, we need to use our body, and we need to use our feelings to be able to find understanding of this. So the very first thing that we're going to do is connect with the heart. And if you want to, you can touch the space over your sternum where the heart is, and just connect to the heart as an organ that beats within you, pumping blood all day, every day that you're alive. Let's also connect with the heart as an expression of emotion. We know that love is directly connected to the heart. We know that the deep feeling of bond and attachment comes also through the heart. And so let's just remember some times in our lives where we've really felt that, like deep, deep within us, within our hearts. Now, what I want to do is link the heart and the mind or the brain together. And so I just want to use a very, very simple breathing technique to do that. When we breathe in, I want us to just feel like energy just spreading from in and going up to the mind and also into the heart. And just feel that connection to the best of your abilities. And now I want to come back to the heart. Okay. I want you to think deep, deep, deep within your heart, beyond the tissue, beyond the cells. Connect deep into the center of your heart, deeper than the molecules, deeper than the atoms. I want you to connect deep, deep, deep into the center of your heart, using your imagination, that connection and that feeling to love, and the direction of your mind to go to that place. It doesn't matter how you connect there, you just need to know that that's where we are. When we go deep into the heart, we're going to start at a point of quantum uncertainty. We want to start at a point that when it's a point, we know what it is, but we don't know where it is. And if we know where it is, there's no point there to know what it is. A fluctuation so fast that we can't see the difference. From this point, we connect to this point as one, or love, or here. This point is very important in our lives because it's where you always are. no matter where you go, no matter where you are on earth, no matter where you are in vision. This is where we originate from, and this point is where we navigate through life. So this is one, and love. The second is time, and I want us to define time as now, and now expressing everywhere in the universe at this exact moment. So I want us to imagine this point extending everywhere through the entire universe, and that we are connected from this point everywhere in the universe that we know. And by universe, I mean the empirical universe, the scientific one where you see stars outside. At the same point, I want us to connect the I. Ever since you were born, you have been a single being, and the single being represents you, the one you know, pure self-reference. The same one that was 1 year old, 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old. The pure awareness itself of your own existence, right here in the center of this heart. From this point, we are aware of 4 realms of consciousness. I call them realms because they're like great containers for our perception. And from the very moment that we were born until now, or from the very moment we started perceiving, maybe even in the womb, until now, there has been a constant series and flow of perception, and we have perceived via these 4 realms. One of them is physical. It's your body and the physical universe. It's your relationship to physical matter and space. It's your relationship to all the other people in your lives and our possessions and our things that we have. And at the same time, we have a mind that functions through the brain. We have an imagination that functions through the extension of the mind. And we have feelings that function via the connection of the brain and the heart and the body. And so these are our 4 realms of consciousness. And they're emanated here from the heart, and they include the brain, and they include the heart, and they include the entirety of our being. So come into connection within yourself, into the 4 realms of consciousness, which is mind, imagination, body, and feeling. Now I want us to use our imagination to conceive of every experience we've had through our lives. From the very first experience that you had that you may not even have a memory for, all the way until now. There is a single timeline. We have lived that timeline right now in every single moment, and in every single moment that we experience it, it becomes past. When we look at ourselves in the universe and we look at the universe, we see a commonality, which is that the universe and ourselves are always in motion. We're in motion in 2 different kinds. One kind is vibratory, and it's scientific, and it's measurable. And another one is comparative, like cars together driving across a road that are in comparative movement. That is very, very important to how we experience our own consciousness and how we experience life, to understand that in every single moment, we and the universe move as one. It can be seen as 2, 3, 4 to infinity, but the movement itself is an expression at once. That expression of everything that is connected in physicality is also connected to what is in our minds, our feelings, and our imagination, which produces an interaction, and we all experience via this interaction of motion and vibration. Literally everything that happens in our lives at any given time is expressed as a single whole. We have the love deep within our heart right now as a self-aware being of the entirety of our perception that is always moving and always interacting. And the totality of that is you or me or Aubrey or anybody else on the planet, and that is your whole being. When we look at that whole being in any given moment, what we see is that that origin of love is something that we all know, and we know it as medicine, and we know it as something that heals us. We know that we were born into the world a bundle of that love, and we know it still resides within us deep, even though our life experiences have done many things to try to cloud that awareness within us. And so this is our 8th dimension, is our own medicine, our own love as people. Once we connect to that love and we awaken to the entirety of our lives, we see that our lives are filled with many, many things that we call medicine, things that heal us, things that make life better, things that make us feel better. And if we really look at those, and the term that we use for them is medicine, if we really look at those medicines, we see that all of those medicines bring us back to the connection of the center point of love. They center us in our lives, and they help us release the fears that encumber us in our everyday existence. And so we start from this center point deep of love, and we recognize that in every single human, we share the same love. We look at the time and we see now, and we see in every single human we share right now. We share that we are all self-aware. We share that we all experience consciousness in the same 4 forms or the same 4 realms. The imagination, physicality, emotion, and cognition, or the mind. We see that we are in one expression, an emanating motion in and through the entirety of the universe at once, that we are part of and that we experience. Through an interaction of matter and vibration, energies, and things themselves that have in our consciousness tremendous importance because they shape the entirety of our life. But we found that in modern world, it's very easy to get lost within that experience and not really know the foundation of our existence or our consciousness, which is why we know that origin medicine deep within our hearts is healing for others as well as ourselves, and that we can always connect to it. And then we can know that through other medicines, they can all lead us to that exact same love and that exact same understanding of universal truths for all of humanity, individually and collectively.
That's it, my friend.
That's it. That's the starting point. That's the starting point. From here, what I would like to see, and I would like to put it out there to people, if they're interested in proving it, quantifying it, mapping it, modeling it, and turning it into technologies that can help the planet and help humanity, that's why we're here. And it's something that I would love to share with, as many people that are interested.
The way that the way that you've been able to, as you say, you've codified it, you've mapped it, and it's not that it's different than what these other traditions are saying. It's just the structure that's been applied. Like the Hawaiian kahunas who have the Ha'aponopono belief is very much in line with that same idea that we're all part of that one single point. And these other mystical traditions all get there, but it's spoken around it and philosophically there. But this is the blueprint. These are the bones for the math of this whole thing.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. I think that I claim no ownership in the sense of having created these concepts. On the contrary, they're shared through all universal mysticism worldwide, and they've been shared for tens of thousands of years. There's traditions that understand all the different pieces. Something that was special to my own path was that in my tradition, there was no tradition, meaning that we could learn from anybody and everybody. So spiritually, I connected with all of the traditions worldwide to learn from the great masters, and who I called the ascended masters from all the traditions. And the culmination was to understand the universal points found in each one of those traditions and coalesce them, for what is now a global humanity. Before, each one of those traditions was relative to its own culture, but we don't live like that anymore. And so to bring them all together into a cohesive map now allows us to start to develop, new healing modalities and treatment and use, to expand consciousness, help people.
Yeah. it's funny. You look at all these traditions, and at the core, one of the core teachings is non-judgment in all these traditions. But a very intrinsic part of these traditions is judgment of all other traditions. It's this really ironic state in which everybody thinks their way, their ascended masters are the path. But really, what you're talking about here is there's many ways to the same road, both from the medicine side, whether it's marijuana, whether it's ayahuasca, whether it's going deep in a float tank like I know you did today. There's so many paths to that truth, and there's so many traditions that you can get there. And the new way in this emerging world, this new world, is going to be not, finding one new path and shutting everything out. It's going to be the inclusion of everything, and I think that's going to be the final way, because that's unbreakable. That has the support of all different facets, every wisdom that's come about.
Yeah, the traditions are there, and they're all most of them, not all of them, but most of them are open to receiving outside participation. You don't have to be specifically a member of the tribe to have the experience. There's endless competition around the traditions. That was always confusing for me, which is why I always looked into them for what I considered to be their very best, or their cleanest, or purest form and expression, ultimately, which to me came to truth and love. And I saw love as something that was universally shared, and truth as something that was the expression of that love itself. Like the way a human being expresses that love is truth, and that ultimately truth could be shared amongst, an endless number of people, as long as there was flexibility and openness to what that truth looked like. And I thought that would be a great platform to at least start to build a bridge between the traditions, and also for people to start to be able to really unite to make a difference, or be able to make a change, or be effective. I think there's so much emphasis in the world on healing, right? And I would like to start to see the emphasis on not needing healing. Right, let's start to measure our success.
Let's keep going upstream.
Yeah, not how well we heal problems. Let's start to work on the problems so that we don't have to heal them. And I think that we're just on the cusp now of that, right? I think it's such a dynamic time, and there are some, really awake, really great minds that are all now starting to get really to work together, and that's never been seen before. So it's like, let's work together. Let's turn it into a we, not just an I.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the analogies that both of us like to use is, if you look at human consciousness like an iPhone, which takes a piece, takes a download, most of us aren't in constant communication with the mother cloud that has the perfect source code. It has iPhone's updates 1 through infinity. It's all available there. It's just a matter of what our hardware can actually accommodate, at that given point. But all of these paths are really just opening that up. It's like plugging the phone back into the computer, back into the cloud. And whatever hardware improvements we've made will allow new software to kind of come through. And that is the greatest healing, because those plans have all of the answers. You hear these spontaneous remissions of everything. Well, how did that happen? Well, some forces that be in the body have the ability to reverse anything if the right conditions are present. And I think a key part of that is just connecting and maintaining that connection to the source.
Yeah, the connection's really key. Consistency is key, right? Making it part of lifestyle is key. But another part that's also really important is perspective. And one perspective that always blows my mind is that human beings are excited by animals, but not by each other. Right. Even though human beings are the most interesting animals on the planet, right? That one. And then the other side of it is to also understand that if we go back far enough in history, all of the major inventions that have shaped the entirety of the way that we collectively live did not exist 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago. And so to really be open, and if you're inventive, and if you have a mind for creation and engineering and modeling and checking things out, the cusp of new technology is every day, right? We have the possibility of developing new things and inventing new things and using human ingenuity to continue to push the boundary of how we know life and how we know existence and how we know source and how we connect and how we relate. And so why not use it? Let's utilize technology. Let's utilize the mind. Let's utilize our Western education. Let's utilize mysticism. Let's utilize all of it to really make a very positive impact, not only in our own lives, but the lives of the other people we touch.
Para el bien de todos.
Para el bien de todos.
For the good of all.
Absolutely.
It's a call to arms, my brothers and sisters. Let's do it. It's been a fucking honor to hang with you. And
Thank you.
I look forward to
Same.
a lifelong alliance. And let's do this, brother.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much again for me too. And kudos again to all the work that you guys do. And, thank you all. And if you're interested in our work, bluemorphofoundation.org or bluemorphotours.com down in Peru. And, we're charity. We want to help the world. So let's do it.
And each part of the world, before you help the world, I mean, one of these key concepts is becoming fit for service. So, don't worry. You don't have to even worry too much about helping the world. If you're just helping yourself, that's the way to start. Get yourself fit for service, and then you'll be even more effective in helping the world. So it's okay to focus on yourself.
I would say it's mandatory. And the world I'm talking about is our world. Like it's your world that you live in personally.
Yeah,
right? That is our world. That's the collective.
Indeed. Thank you, Hamilton. It's been an honor, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Everybody, peace. There will be part 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but not this quickly. So you're going to have to wait for the next time. Later.